Hello and welcome. My name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 399, Trash to Treasure. Posted by Arundel, Kovrex and V. Hello, it's Arundel back for another electric adventure. You got your first look at Fulgora in Friday Facts 398. If you haven't read that already, please read that first, or go watch my video. Now let's take a look at the planet's mechanics. Lightning storms. Every night on Fulgora brings an immense lightning storm. Lightning hits things at random based on material and height. If you're wandering around in the middle of nowhere, expect to get zapped a few times. It can kill you and wreck your stuff, so look for shelter when it starts getting dark. So we've got a video here playing, and the caption to it just says damage and frequency boosted for demonstration purposes. So this is clearly the lightning effect being applied, but they've amped up the number of strikes and the amount of damage that each strike does. And as you can see, with that boosted effect, it completely wrecks this mini factory in just a few minutes, really. If that, a few seconds, I suppose it is, like 20 seconds or something. The effect is really nice. I really like the style of the lightning that they're doing. I do have the video just chopped out so that we can sort of step through it a bit, but it appears to be making some belts, regular yellow belts, and then what I assume is a chain to make red belts, possibly, but certainly yellow belt components, I think. We don't actually see any of the machines kind of in action, but yes, you've got a strike on this, I think, which almost completely destroys it. There you go. It zaps it out, doesn't it, on the display? But single lightning strike there takes out an entire roboport. So this is obviously much sort of amped up from what it is, but I'm guessing, you know, a few good strikes on you would destroy anything you've got, and presumably any machines wouldn't last very long without some kind of protection. The more I see of this, whatever we're calling it, edging thing, the more more amazing it looks. It looks really great. That sort of artificial cliff stuff. I say it does have a sort of HR Giga, bio. There's another artist that does that. I can never remember their name. That sort of biomechanical, thing to it. We'll also go through, by the way, we'll look at some of my predictions that I made in a little bonus video, if anyone saw that. But I got most of it wrong. I was kind of expecting to get most of it wrong, but it'd be quite funny to go through it. Ruins provide initial safe areas. Not only are some of the large structures more likely to get hit because they're bigger metal, but there are some ancient alien lightning attractors dotted around that guarantee protection in a moderate radius. And then we've got a little picture here. The caption to it says, the area with guaranteed protection is highlighted cyan when you interact with the structures. It's a bit too big, that one, so I have popped it out here so we can see the full picture. But basically the cyan is the blue. As you can see, we've got the lightning rod type things. And then, of course, you've got this sort of circular, area that's clearly around those things. And it looks like they're a bit sort of generous with the overlaps. So, you'd expect that to be two circles interacting, but it's sort of, like that. And I guess the other point is that perhaps some of these provide some additional benefit. Seems to be the implication, though it doesn't seem to show it on the cyan overlay. So this great big tall building, which is why it was calling them skyscrapers before, that's more likely to get struck than, if you're standing next to it, that'll get struck, basically. Sounds like whenever you click on one of these, you'll get this overlay coming up, and that'll tell you where the sort of safer areas are. And I'm sort of preempting it a bit, but basically explains that makes these the best areas to build in when you first land on the planet, and try to avoid the sort of the red areas, otherwise your stuff will get wrecked. Some of your own structures, like rails, can handle being struck by lightning, but most structures will take a lot of damage if they get hit. If you need to throw down a few structures of your own, it's not a bad idea to do it near these ancient attractors. So yeah, just explaining what, so I was preempting it a little bit. And basically the idea is build in the blue areas when you first get there until you've got the techs yourself to protect your stuff. It's interesting, it says that lightning hitting rail won't cause damage. It kind of makes sense. They are great big conductors that are grounded. You can understand why it doesn't cause any damage. That also tends to answer a question that you might have had about if a train is near a rail that gets struck? Is the train itself going to get damaged? And if it gets struck by lightning and it did break the track, what would happen to all your rail system? However, it sounds like trains themselves probably will get damaged by being struck by lightning. It doesn't quite say that directly, but that's kind of the implication. It does also, if you note, say some of your own structures, like rails, can handle being struck by lightning. So that implies that others can actually handle lightning strikes as well, although it's not really clear which ones. And obviously we saw a roboport, getting trashed, and assemblers getting trashed, and all this sort of stuff here. So one thing that does beg a question, because these are obviously electrical buildings, the accumulators, and they do get trashed. So I say it does make me wonder what would survive. It also mentions, as it says here, that lightning hits things at random based on material and height. So a roboport, which is a lot of steel in it, getting hit does make sense. And then height is interesting because that tends to imply that, as I say, we are getting a kind of height mechanic in the game. And so that, things that are tall, so maybe a beacon is more likely to get struck than an assembler, or would get struck first, sort of thing. Perhaps your power lines are a real attractor for lightning strike, because the big power poles are very tall. But yeah, it sounds like maybe there is a bit of a height ranking in the game for structures, and it sort of says, right, well, this is a high building, so hit that one more frequently, sort of thing. Although obviously you would want for everything to not get hit, really. Lightning collection. So this section starts off with a little video, and this appears to be the lightning rod. It does explain it, but this is the structure we were all assuming would be there, and it is basically a very simple lightning protector. It looks awesome. It looks really, really cool. It looks a bit like the beacons. There's that sort of spiky thing for the beacons, married with a sort of a mini battery almost, a mini sort of accumulator. So yeah, and it does sort of explain that in a moment, because you notice it's got this little gauge on the side, which I think is part of what it's doing. So it says, soon after arriving on Fulgora, you'll figure out how to make your own lightning rods, which is presumably that structure there. These protect a slightly smaller area than the alien lightning attractors, but you can place them where you want. Better yet, lightning rods can capture some of the energy from each strike and add it to your electrical network. You'll need a solid amount of accumulators to store other energy, though. So yes, as theorized and kind of confirmed, these lightning rods are a way of gathering power on the surface of Fulgora, on the planet. Is when it explains this at the very beginning. It says it's at night. It can kill you and wreck your stuff, so look for shelter when it starts getting dark. Every night on Fulgora brings an immense lightning storm. So it seems like, where I was wondering, is this adding a sort of a randomization mechanic to the game? Like it shows here, with this being dark and this being dark. The lightning is entirely contained to the night. So effectively, when it gets dark, that is a lightning storm coming over at the same time, and that's when the lightning will happen. So if you think about it, it's almost like a reversed solar panel thing. So during the day, your solar panels will produce power, and you can use that to charge your accumulators. But then for the day, it's constant, and for the night, it drops away, and there's no solar power during the night. This effectively is then the reverse of that. So basically, during the night, the storm comes in, is there all night, and then goes away during the day. So I'm guessing, and I believe it's not. Has it said? I'm not sure, that Fulgora is actually one of the furthest planets from the sun. So presumably the solar power is low, but you could effectively therefore get continuous generation from lightning and solar. And so you've got a really good way of making sure your accumulators are charged, because they're going to get that bursts of electricity at night. I don't know if they're going to do it like it's an even, averaged out, same amount of hits everywhere. Or in certain radiuses type of thing. But it does feel like that would be quite a peaky power, that, sometimes you'd have more strikes, sometimes less, so you get more power, less power, that type of thing. So it'd be quite interesting to balance it up and, learn how to control it, basically. And it just says that there's something really satisfying about the sky trying to kill you, but then you turn it around and exploit it. Lightning just went from a threat to a resource. Now, next up then is this bigger structure here. So that's the lightning rod, okay? And now we've got this structure here. And it says, once you're producing the planet's science pack, so it's obviously unlocked later in the science tree once you've already unlocked that science pack, you can unlock lightning collectors. An upgrade from the simple lightning rod, these collectors protect a much larger area and convert much more of each bolt's energy into usable electricity. So basically this is, a bigger, more advanced, bigger range version of the lightning rod, and specifically designed to harness and capture and harness that power. And as you can see, it does look beefier and more significant. It actually looks properly like it's got an accumulator at the bottom of it now. And I'm wondering if this is just a general indicator or whether it does have some charge storage capability in and of itself, because that does look like a little battery that's filling up. And you notice it does stay sort of with charge while, after it's been struck. So I'm wondering if these have a small, capacity themselves, and perhaps these do as well. But really you need to transfer it into accumulators to really harness it. It may not seem obvious, but the range is a double benefit. Not only can you protect a greater area with fewer collectors, but if they're at the edge of a plateau, they can reach lightning further away from the plateau and grab lightning that would be unreachable with a smaller collection area. This is especially significant for very small plateaus, as you'll see below. So it explains what plateaus are literally in the next section. But the basic idea is that when you're not on a plateau, so this other stuff, and it will explain that, when you put that on the edge, you're basically able to then gather the lightning that would be striking over there. So it's like it's got a big harvesting area, like the big mining drill is huge harvesting area compared to the normal mining drill. And so it's basically then able to, where the normal collector has that sort of area, the big collector has a big area. So if you put it on the edge of these plateaus, you're then reaching out over the area of the sort of, I can't remember what he calls them, the oil sands basically, and you're able to pull in the lightning from the edge. One of the things it doesn't make clear, but I'm guessing is fairly obvious, is what happens when these areas overlap. My assumption is that, as I say, because it probably has some kind of density to the number of strikes that it does, although it'll be randomized, it'll be on average, do one lightning strike here, every 5 minutes or something like that. That therefore you can't kind of generate more power by having more of these. So a great big line of them, maybe there is a maximum frequency or something like that of number of strikes that it can take. But I would think maybe that this is just a single structure, collects all of, is able to collect all of the lightning in a particular area. So there's no benefit to having, a row of 10 of them as such. But that may not be the case. It may be the case that having a big sort of farm of these actually attracts lightning from a further and further area away, or just attracts more strikes, or increases that strike potential. So, as I say, it'd be interesting to see exactly how that is. My assumption, as I say, is that no, there's no point having 20 of these in an area. Maybe 2 or 3, will be enough, and that'll gather all the lightning, or maybe just one will be fine, sort of thing. Otherwise, they're not very good protected buildings, are they? So, islands of stability. The plateaus of Fulgora are like islands. They are surrounded by sinking oil sands that act like quicksand for structures. You can walk across them, but the only things you can build on the sinking sands are elevated rail supports and offshore pumps. So that's obviously confirming that when it was talking in the previous Friday Facts about the sinking, and we showed the engineer slowing down. If you build things on these areas, I don't know if they get immediately destroyed, but they sink into this oil sand and are lost basically. So the only things you can actually build on the oil sand, as it says, are the elevated rail stands and offshore pumps. So we don't use oil pumps to gather this. But if you notice there, it doesn't include pipes. So what that's basically seems to be saying is that, it must include pipes, because how else would you pump? An offshore pump has to pump into a pipe, doesn't it? So even though you can put an offshore pump on it, how would you get anything out of it? Because you would have to put a pipe on it. So it must include pipes as well. The other option is that I guess you could put it on a bit like it on the edge of on the offshore, as it were, on the edge of the shore, that you have to put one part of the pump on the plateau. Obviously then the pipe is properly on the plateau. So that could be the other way of doing it. That seems a bit odd, I must admit, when you've got these gigantic, should we call them seas of oil sand all around. That tends to imply, look at them. And if this is all gatherable oil, that's insane. It does say later on that there is a landfilling tech for the oil sand, so you could then start harvesting all of this stuff. But that's insane, the amount of oil that there is there. But yes, so you can walk across it. There doesn't appear to be a death hazard to you, but you cannot build on it until you've got this other tech. Lightning is collected based on the bolts that would strike that area naturally, meaning that each island has a maximum energy collection rate with full coverage. And I say that's what I was kind of getting at. So how many do you have to get full coverage is my question. Islands are usually separated by a gap that's larger than basic quality, big electric poles. So in most cases, each island will have its own electrical network. Island size matters. So I'm guessing some of these must be connectable. That must be just on the edge, particularly if you had higher quality ones, I guess. And maybe you could connect those two, for example, there. But this is the map, basically, as it's shown. But this is the map I've just taken it out so that you can see it full screen. These are different size islands, basically. So you've got the small islands, and then sort of medium islands, and then large ones. And it goes on to explain what the sort of difference is between them. What's interesting is I think this is the resource we had shown last time, which it will confirm is scrap. So you can see that some of these islands have a lot more scrap on them than others, and I say it does explain that. But I don't understand what this is. It's not entirely clear to me what this is, because it's like a square thing, isn't it? What is that? Maybe it does properly explain it and I just didn't read it properly the first time, but what is this square thing in the middle here? Because it's very, very similar across all of these islands. And you notice it's always on the small ones. But yes, so the idea would be that you would be able to build elevated rail between these, but they're too far apart for you to do power poles until you've got, say, the landfill. So you have to have every island has to be its own power thing, which, given that you've got lightning just everywhere, every night, isn't as bad as it sounds. There are different types of island. The largest islands have expansive deserts and more natural terrain. There's more space to build and more area to collect power, but no resources. So that would be these big ones here. Yeah? Doesn't quite mesh. Maybe this is an older generation, algorithm or something, but if these are the scrap resources, then that's not quite true about no resources. So I don't know, maybe that isn't the scrap. Although it seems to be colour-wise, it seems to be right, but yeah. Or maybe those aren't the large islands. Maybe a large island is even bigger still. I mean, that one doesn't have any resources. And that one, I suppose, technically does, only because it looks like it's got, a smaller one glommed onto it. But yeah, that's definitely got resources on it, that big island. Medium islands are usually cities and have a mix of space and resources, but the resources are not as rich. These islands are a good place to get started, though, as they have a good balance of space, resources, and ancient protection from lightning. So my assumption on the medium islands is it's these ones, and again, those aren't massively different in size, so maybe it's just you can't tell, or it does look like it has roads on it, on some of these. But they don't seem to have too many resource patches. But say it's difficult to tell exactly what these are, and maybe this was an older way of doing it, and they sort of tweaked it later. But yes, the idea basically being that really it's these medium-sized islands that you would focus on, to start with, because they've got a nice balance of space, resources, and lightning strikes. The small islands have some special significance. They're always isolated by a moat. The resources here are far richer, but the lack of building space means they will probably need off-site processing. So these then are the smaller islands. And as you can see, there is always a big space around them. Yeah, so you're going to have to train stuff out and process it on one of the other islands. And as I say, there's this white thing. Now, that could just be like super dense, scrap or something like that, but it feels like that should be a different resource because it's very, very different looking. It could be a place, and it does describe them as special, so maybe there's something extra coming for that. But there were also those like pits almost that the aliens had with oil in them, so maybe it's a super duper oil extracting place where you get proper oil, but they look like patches. They look like very square patches. My guess is it's a particular type of building, that there's a very, very large building that we're not seeing. Maybe it's the aliens equivalent of a rocket silo, basically, and that's why there's that on there, and that's also why there's so much trash on those islands, because that's where they just dump stuff. The result is that you'll typically be motivated to create a train network that spans over many islands using elevated rails. So a really good excuse for using elevated rails. Screenshot of a late game Fulgora factory. This is with older map generation, but it demonstrates connecting islands with trains well. Early on, islands are oases for multi-level train crossings, but very late in the game you unlock the ability to landfill the oily ocean. As this is late game, you can also spot structures like rail ramps and electric poles placed in the middle of the oil. We've got all sorts of stuff going on here. There's an extensive rail network. These are the islands. It is old gen, as it says, so it doesn't quite look like this, but these are the oily patches, and as we can see, there is all sorts of rail built on the oily patches. And then we've got this island being used for some industry. This looks like possibly solar panels. Would it be? Accumulators, and this looks like a logistics system. Loads and loads of roboports and what have you. But loads of belts over here. We're doing some kind of construction here, and lots of stations, lots and lots of trains. These square ones, of course, are the rail elevations. I believe they're the ramps rather. And then these seem to be the actual, supports. The little dots here are power things, because that's, they've unlocked that technology for doing that. I'm not sure what this green thing is in the middle. So I don't know what that would be. I'm not sure I remember any green things. No, I can't think of anything that's green in the game, but as is often the case with these, it's, it'll be something blindingly obvious probably. We've got a little Spidertron here. And all sorts of a built-up area here with all sorts of stuff going on. There is this white stuff, though. So, this can't be... It doesn't look like there's miners on these patches, so I'm not 100% sure what that was. And I say it is old gen, so, old map gen, so maybe that was what the scrap used to look like. But there don't appear to be miners on these, on these patches. So I'm not sure what's actually kind of happening there. And that could be what the white stuff has become, maybe. Oh yes, the thing I was going to say before I went through that picture is when they introduced elevated rails, they said that it was, a mod, and it was basically optional. But it doesn't sound now like it's optional. I suppose you could just, build all your islands completely independently, and I don't know how you would get stuff between them, though, because eventually you're going to want to stick it in a rocket or build something somewhere else. But I don't see how you would play this map without elevated rails. If the restriction is that anything on the oil sand, except elevated rails, gets trashed, basically, gets destroyed, sinks into the sand, then how would you play it without elevated rails? You couldn't use bots because it'll be too far for them to fly. Belts obviously would get destroyed. You would have to get to the point of unlocking that tech before you could build on it properly. So yeah, it sounds like elevated rails isn't something you can really turn off, because we know you need every science pack to get to the the last planet and do the end game. So you need the science pack. So you're either massively restricting what you can do, or basically just going to have to play with elevated rails with Space Age, so it's not really a swappable mod then. The First Impressions by Covarex. The things described so far work quite well and were not mechanically touched since the initial design, but the rest didn't have such a straightforward creation story. When I was doing the historically first playthrough of the planet's content in January 2022, everything was different. I visited Fulgora as the third planet. At that time, it was a pristine desert planet. The only thing special about it were the lightning, the islands, one new ore, and a few new recipes. Each island only had one resource, and water only existed on certain islands as water springs, a bit like oil. But all of the resource mining, the processing, and the usual intermediates were all the same as on Nauvis. And since it was the third planet already, I started to feel worn out from the repetition of doing the same old mines, smelting, circuit production, oil refining, etc. At this time, I started to feel sceptical about the whole expansion. It felt like the problem of per-planet repetition is not really solvable, and the whole idea of the expansion is fundamentally broken. Not a good place to be. This problem of repetition was relevant to basically all the planets, so it felt hard to solve. Giving up was just not an option. We had to try to improve things one step at a time and hope for the best. Since Fulgora needed some revamp, and as I felt desperate, I was very open to wild changes. The first idea was a nuclear option, and it sounded something like this. Remove the resources and just put some trash that some aliens have dumped on the planet. It could be directly transformed into any basic resource through assembling machines, so the game would be shortened and the repetitive parts removed. This would already be an improvement, but Erendel took it a step further in a way that made everything fit together nicely. This was an amazing opportunity to integrate the recycler into the game. Up until this point, the recycler was mostly just a quality recycling resource sink tool. However, if the resource you're mining is made of the same high-level scrap and the recycler just transforms it into all kinds of intermediate products of a fixed ratio, then the gameplay could become much more interesting. The challenge wouldn't be getting the resources, but dealing with the flow of random mixed products, sorting them, handling the excesses, etc. This proved to be a viable idea, and step by step it led us to the current state of the planet. So, to unpick that slightly, it sounds like essentially Covrex was a bit worried that it's effectively the criticism I've heard of SpaceX. I've not got there yet, but that every planet just ends up basically being the same. You stick down miners, you process the ore, you make a plate or a ingot or an I-beam or something like that. That goes into just another recipe, and then you have the complexity of shipping it off planet, and it gets very repetitive very quickly. So the point here is, and it comes back to what they've been saying from the very beginning, what they wanted to do with the expansion for each planet is introduce new mechanics, like properly new mechanics that, although you're still making stuff and building things, you're having to do it in a different way. You're solving different challenges each time. And as I say, in their first iteration, they hadn't achieved that. And that's probably what came out of that. That was the realization that they needed to make it different each time, or different enough, I suppose. And so what they've introduced, and it's why it's there, and it was what everyone kind of suspected, was a scrap resource. And the scrap resource is a mixed resource. So a bit like when you're when you're processing uranium and you have a percentage chance of getting the good ore, the good 235. I always get them wrong way around. When you get the good stuff, you've also then got processes for turning it, the bad stuff into the good stuff, basically. So the basic idea is to almost building on that. It's taking that percentage chance idea from the scrap. The scrap is just a random collection of all sorts of rubbish, and it gives you some stuff, and then you've got the challenge of dealing with all of that random rubbish. It may give you lots and lots of one particular item that you don't really want, but maybe that item can be processed into things that you do want. But of course then it's very chance-based, so maybe that chance changes as you're going through, and you get more of a certain different type of item for a couple of hours. And so it's all about managing that randomized throughput. I'm guessing, given people didn't react well to the quality mechanic, that might prove controversial. To me, it sounds very interesting. I hope, I'll be honest, that the things we need and use, and this is implied by the new resource that's going to be talked about in a bit. This is a long Friday Facts, by the way, so sorry about that video length. I'm hoping that even though you need to deal with all this random stuff, the things you're trying to make are actually not needed in vast quantities. So, for example, I'm hoping that the science pack is quite generous, or, you only need a few of them, because although I think I'll quite enjoy solving the challenge of managing it all, scaling something like that up, and it might be why they give us the landfill, so that if and when you need scale, you can just landfill the oil and just build on it. But scaling something like that up could get quite annoying, because we're going to be constrained to randomly crinkly plateaus. One of the beauties of what you can do in vanilla Factorio is just concrete the land, concrete every piece of water, flatten every cliff, and just build your giant mega factory. Now, we can eventually, by the sound of it, do that on this planet, but if you look at this, these are tiny build areas compared to the amount of space you've got. Even these big ones, they've got lots of cliffs on them, so we're going to have to blow up a load of cliffs, presumably. They're odd shapes, which is fun. It pushes you a bit, or I think it probably pushed me a bit to more spaghetti type organic builds, which is something I've been discovering I really enjoy trying to do. Deliberately spaghettifying the base. So that sounds like it'd be fun. The difficult bit of it is you do get to a point where you want scale. You want 5 belts of red circuits, and so you need to build a giant factory, and then you've not got any space to do it. I think the compensations, and partly why they're there, is the stacking, the piling of items onto belts, so you can get vastly more throughput for the same, without changing anything other than just, doing this piling, and also the mega fast belts. So we know that those are locked to being made on Fulgora, so shipping them around is going to be a little tricky. But being able to stick in a few belts in your key bits that allow you to scale up. Say you want a red circuit, processing area, because I say you're not going to be making them, you're going to be processing them. But you want an area that makes red circuits, and we know that they're horrible to produce, very slow. So instead of creating a gigantic factory to do them, instead you upgrade all of your belts, you use pilers, and so an area that was producing a yellow belt's worth can suddenly produce 5 blue belts worth or what have you. So that, I think, is the sort of inbuilt compensation for us not just landfilling the world sort of thing. What is also interesting is it how much people have guessed from just seeing the things. I confess, I put it in my predictions and stuff, I think, but it wasn't really my idea. It entirely makes sense. I don't think I thought of it anyway, but basically using the recycler to process this scrap. It sounds like it was moved, though, when they talk about it, that it was a mechanic beforehand, and they've aligned it to Fulgora, if you see what I mean. So you always had quality you always had the recycler as a part of quality, and then they just realised, we can make recyclers be on Fulgora because of this scrap resource. One of the things that's interesting there, though, is that does mean, I think, that recyclers are tied to Fulgora. Now, maybe that's not the case, because you can unlock quality on Nauvis, and so you'll get the recycler there because it's a quality mechanic. But it is sounding like recyclers are tied to Fulgora in the same way that the foundry is tied to Vulcanus. So we're only going to be able to make recyclers by the same things on Fulgora. I'm slightly unsure about this mechanic because we know that the weight limit for rockets is actually pretty small. So I don't know, I'm a little torn with that. I'd quite like to build on Nauvis, just bring all, just be able to build foundry after foundry, and the new building from every planet, loads of them on Nauvis. But to do that, it sounds like you're going to have to send an absolute ridiculous number of rockets up, because I can't see how a foundry is going to be any more than 1 per rocket, for example. We'll have to see. Ruins and Resources by Erendel. Factorio has certain themes around the engineer's impact on the world. There was something that felt really out of character for the engineer to collect and effectively clean up trash from a planetary dump. If the only sign of the aliens on the planet is piles of trash, it isn't very interesting from a lore or visual perspective. It's much more fun if they have an actual presence there. So if we're going to officially add technological aliens to the lore, we should do it right. And for Factorio, that means tearing through an archaeological site with a mining drill. So the planet is no longer a dump, it's a ruin, albeit a heavily polluted one. Inhabitants are gone, but their technology remains. The main resource on Fulgora is scrap. It's not just trash, but a big polluted mix of ruined machinery, fallen architecture, ice and rock. The scraps of an ancient civilization. This conceptual change also plays really nicely into getting higher tier items to feed into the recycling mechanic. So if you don't remember, or you don't, haven't seen that particular Friday Facts, the recycler actually takes things down the production chain. So an assembler, takes cogs and plate and turns them into belt, and then turns belt into underground belt and splitters, etc., by adding in extra resources. A recycler does the opposite. So it takes a belt and decomposes it into a plate and a gear. It takes a splitter and splits it into a circuit and and the belt, and then you would take that down. So depending on what you're trying to make, you're going, you're reversing down the production chain. One of the things that's interesting here, so this is 6, I suppose, technically. 6 miners on scrap patches feeding into a train. We've got the advanced, lightning rod thing, so the more powerful one. And this, I mean, I didn't know what was going on here for a moment, but this is the elevated rail section. So this is a train sat on the elevated rail section. I didn't know what the heck was going on because it was poking up and I was like, oh, is that a new train? Are we getting, electric trains or something like that? But no, it's just sat on the base end of the ramp, basically. But yes, these are then pulling in, mining the scrap, basically, which is then being pushed around and sent into various carriages, basically, to fill them up. It doesn't look like it's very productive. It's difficult to tell sometimes with miners, but it looks like it might have quite a slow mining rate. But what it is producing, if you can just about see it on the belt, and I've got a version of it here in case you can't, but basically it's an actual thing, scrap. So it's not that when you mine this, it outputs a random item. So it doesn't randomly put out whatever scrap is made of. It puts out a scrap, and a scrap is what you then take and process. So it's becomes part of a different type of chain, basically. But nothing really particularly interesting other than they have built around the structures, basically, or left them in place, basically, and then you've got this one protecting it. Recycling. The recycler is unlocked by mining scrap and is critical to Fulgora's industry. So just confirmation there that you have to mine scrap, so you have to go to this planet, you have to mine scrap, and that unlocks the recycler. Okay, so it is entirely tied to this planet. Interesting. When you recycle scrap, you get a few low-level products like ice and stone, but you also get some high-level items like processing units. You don't get certain things like copper and iron directly. For those, you'll need to recycle things like processing units and their recycled products repeatedly until you get the resources you need. And then we've got a little video just showing that. This is the scrap coming in, so we've got the scrap on a belt here. It's being fed into a whole set of recycling machines. So they just take in the scrap directly. It goes straight into it. They then output pretty much a random selection. It does actually give you the percentages in a second. A random selection of items that come out of those. Can see it here, basically. But you see we've got green circuits. This is ice. We've got stone, we've got the new resource, which we'll come on to in a bit. There is something else here, look. There are actually two, unless that's stone, is it? And I'm just imagining it. But it looks like, because there's like a pinky one on this, but then a bluey one. And it's said that you don't get iron ore. So, because we've got stone, you've got regular stone, so I'm not confusing it with stone. We've got this sort of pinky one, and a sort of bluey one. So what is the bluey one? Because it doesn't actually, I think, explain what that is. Unless I'm going mad. We'll come back to that in a second. Because there is a chart showing what you get out of it. But that bluey one doesn't seem to match. It could be that it's placeholder. And the pinky one is just, it's just another version of it. But they've not done the art properly. I get trapped by that one quite a lot. But you've got green circuits, you've got wires, you've got all sorts going on. Red circuits, what else we got here? Batteries, blue circuits, gear wheels, solid fuel, steel there, look. Yeah, so all sorts of stuff going on. It's a sushi belt though, so they're like canonizing a sushi belt approach to building, which is interesting. So then these inserters grab from the sushi belt, okay, and they put them into these other recyclers, okay. The recyclers do have interestingly different coloured smoke. It's not totally different all the time, but do have different coloured smoke, it looks like, from depending on what they're processing. But basically then these turn, these higher level items into lower level items. Like I said, it goes down the production chain. So I think if we go to the start of the video, we can kind of see one in working, because we're doing these green circuits going in here. And you notice it sort of spits out, it's already done it actually, it sort of spits out like copper wire and iron plate, basically. So it's basically taking things down the production chain. here, I say the blue thing, another option for it is that because we see belts snaking around, there is like a blend going on here. So there is a side loading happening just at the bottom here, and the belt is going through, and it's basically being added on to the belt here. So what could well be happening that this could be iron ore, and that the recyclers are somehow able to take it right back down to iron ore. That doesn't sound very likely. I didn't think they worked quite like that, but maybe it can do. So this blue thing here could be iron ore, and it's just simply where it's been down processed so much it's got to the state of being iron ore. I didn't think the recyclers went that low. I thought they stopped basically, but because you're going to have to stop at some point. If you you can't put iron ore into a recycler and get something else out. Yes, so then these recyclers are basically taking it down the tree, and then it's taking the stuff off there. So it's basically giving us a whole new way of doing production. You want gears for something, to build a roboport, for example. So how do you get gears? Well, you have to process scrap and then process the things that scrap makes until you get gears. That's not quite a good example because, as we'll see in a minute, gears are kind of just gears. But you could process it down to iron plate and then make more gears, basically. So yes, the only thing I spotted on this that was a bit odd was this, what appears to be iron ore, and why that would be there. It could, and to me it doesn't it does look similar to iron ore, but it doesn't quite look like iron ore. So I'm wondering if that's another new resource, because the pink one, it will explain in a minute, this sort of pink stony thing. So the next thing then, the scrap recycling recipe as we have it now. That implies it might change. We'll zoom in on this one, and this tells us the percentages of getting chance. Now, my memory, I'm not going to bother going and looking it up, but my memory is that there's a chance of recycling failing and you getting nothing. Because if you look at these numbers, and you can kind of just tell by eyeballing it, it doesn't add up to 100. So I think there's quite high wastage on the scrap, because it actually doesn't even add up to 50%. There is another possibility there, which I say might be tied to that potential blue ore thing, is that there's actually something else. There is another 2% chance to give us like 50% of doing it. And we do know that adding in different module types, I think quality modules, will give a improved chance and things like that. Using higher quality machines gives you a better chance. I think that's what I meant to say. But basically, yeah, this is the stuff you get out. So we've got a 2% chance of processing units. That's quite a high level product, It combines in from, we've obviously got the sulfuric acid, which I assume is just dumped out. You can't get that back. But you've obviously got green circuits and red circuits that go into that. 3% chance on red circuits. So, one of the more difficult items to make, you've got lots of. 1% chance on low density structures. That feeds into the whole needing to build rockets to get off the planet. That's why they're giving those more directly. 7% chance of solid fuel. Again, I'm assuming that rocket fuel is the same recipe. So giving us solid fuel gives us rockets. Steel plate. Again, another sort of higher level resource, or one that's more difficult to manufacture. Concrete, 6% concrete. That feels like it's going to be a bit of a sink until the point, presumably, where that is part of the landfilling recipe. 2% chance on a battery. 5% chance on ice. It explains that in a moment, but that's going to be one of our primary sources of water. I did also think that could potentially be what that white patches were on the ground. I don't know why they would be square things. It does feel like maybe that's what these were in here. That these are ice patches. The planet is meant to be far from the sun, and so having solid water would make some sense. But ice, of course, we do know is available on asteroids as well, so that's not quite a new mechanic as such. 5% chance of stone, kind of your junk basically. 1% holmium ore. And so it goes on to explain that, but that is the new resource for Fulgora. 12% chance of an iron gear wheel. I say it just gives you lots of gear wheels. And a 2% chance of a copper cable. So one of the basic points they make, the point here really is you're not getting iron ore, you're not getting iron plate. Well, you're not getting iron ore, but you're not getting iron plate. You're not getting copper plate. You are getting steel plate, but you're not getting stone brick. For example, you're getting a kind of a particular mix of ingredients, and they don't include the basic plates and stuff like that. So if you need iron plate, so you need to make belts, so you're going to have to process either your iron gears or maybe your steel or what have you, into iron plate and combine them with the iron gear wheels in order to make your belt, basically. I mean, one of the things it is giving us quite directly is making an easy way to do rail, if you think about it, because you've got steel, you've got stone, and then, you would need to change that into iron plate so that you could turn it into iron rods. But basically that's then pieces of rail. So it's very easy access to rail pieces, but getting green circuits is actually going to be a little bit of a challenge, because you're going to have to process the iron and combine it with the copper, for example, or you're going to have to deconstruct your red and blue circuits. Okay, but as I say, if you add this up, it adds up to, I think, 48%. So I think that's a reflection of the fact that recycling is a non-perfect recipe. It doesn't always give you something, but also perhaps there is an extra resource of that makes it up to 50%. Crafting on Fulgora feels fresh yet familiar, as you don't need to learn many new items or recipes. Essentially, the entire crafting tree is inverted. There are quite a few ways to handle the 12 byproduct recipe. Inserter filters, splitter filters, sorting it by robots, circuit networks, and it's the place where the new train interrupts can be very handy. Having quick access to high-tier components means getting back into space after landing on Fulgora can be much faster than on other planets. You might even enjoy bringing some of the expensive items back too. That's all up to you. So that to me is implying that Fulgora could be almost used as a quick trip. So maybe one strategy is for it to be your first planet you go to. You use it to unlock this Holmium type resources and build a few of those, and then you go to some other planets. One of the things that is kind of missing here, we had a hint on Vulcanus that there was going to be a new enemy. We've had no hint at all that there are going to be enemies here. They haven't told us what that Vulcanus enemy is or was, but there is no implication here that there is a biter or anything at all. So I think there won't be now, and basically that lightning mechanic is the thing you're going to have to combat against. So that is your threat, that is your danger, that is the thing pushing you on to make your lightning rods, etc., because it limits where you can build, etc., etc. So it's a different sort of a mechanic, and that there won't be any biters or any enemies at all on this planet. So we've had no hints at all, which is a bit of a shame. I was quite looking forward to having some weirder alien. Fulgoran Fluids. As you may already know, the recycler can only output solids. So how do you get fluids on Fulgora? The polluted sinking wasteland between islands is full of oil. If you put an offshore pump into the sinking sands, you can pump out some usable heavy oil. Infinite heavy oil is slick because it basically reduces oil processing into a bit of cracking. This can be done with the usual recipes, but for that you'll need some water. So confirmation there that there is no new oil recipe. There is no sort of weird heavy into petroleum or something like that recipe. The implication is there's no other fluids at all. There's no other oil fluids at all. We'll have to see about that one later, but basically you get heavy oil directly. So there's no advanced oil processing needed. There's no coal liquefaction or whatever it's called. That's not how you get oil. You get oil as heavy oil and you process it into light and petroleum. But to do that, the standard recipe does require quite a lot of water. And it says the planet has no surface water. It's far too cold and dry. The only source of water in the planet is the ice you get while mining scrap. So that kind of confirms those white patches aren't ice. The ice can be melted into water in a chemical plant easily enough, but you do need to decide when and where to use it. Now we already knew we were getting that ice melting recipe from the space platforms, so that's not a new revelation. But basically, partly I think because we're only getting 5% ice out of the scrap, so there's not going to be a lot of oil just sort of knocking around, which is an interesting flip from Nauvis. Nauvis is just like water everywhere type of thing. Even you never really have a problem with water. So this is an interesting flip round where water is properly scarce. Needing ice for cracking and other water recipes is pretty cool because there's still some scarcity to light oil and petroleum. So in other words, you've got loads and loads of heavy oil, just because it's there and available in the basic oil fields, but making light oil and petroleum is a bit more challenging. And of course, light oil you do need for rocket fuel at the moment. Maybe you won't in the future. Holmium. Fulgora's unique resource is holmium. It's a very rare element in the solar system, and Fulgora is the only planet where it can be found. Unfortunately, the previous inhabitants also knew how precious it was, so there are no longer any accessible deposits. However, rare metals such as this don't just disappear after they are mined. Holmium oxides, or ore, can be recovered from the debris and scattered remains of this long-forgotten civilization. The ore is processed into some holmium intermediates such as electrolyte, superconductors, and supercapacitors. These new things are then turned into the unique end products of this planet, which include the Electromagnetic Science Pack. So, my dreams are dashed. My thought that this was going to be aluminium is just wrong, basically. The only new resource on Holmium, on Fulgora, is Holmium. Okay? We'll come back to what Holmium is for and about at the end of the video. We'll do a proper speculation on what Holmium might be being used for at the end of the video, but we're getting confirmation that we'll get electrolyte, superconductors, and supercapacitors as the things we kind of make out of Holmium. This does, to me, the phrasing might just be a bit off, but I think this is saying that when you mine one of these old buildings, you'll get Holmium ore as well. So it's recovered from the debris, which is the trash, and scattered remains of this long-forgotten civilization. So that could just be a fancy way of saying, they're both scrap, basically. But I think this is saying that if you mine a building, you'll get a bit of Holmium as well. So that gives you kind of a reason to get rid of the buildings as well, rather than just, creating more space for yourself. But yes, so we also get confirmation here that the pink science pack is electromagnetic science, which presumably means it's used for electromagnetic things, which is what we're coming on to. So this is a giant Friday Facts, this one. So hopefully you're still with me. Electromagnetic Plant. So hopefully you're still with me. It is a very long Friday Facts, but we're getting into something really exciting now, which is the new building, okay? This machine can make a lot of different stuff, but it is specialised for the manufacture of electronics and electromagnets. It's this planet's equivalent of the Foundry, and like the Foundry, it's a game changer when you get it. Okay, so we'll play this video. It does have some sound, so I'll shut up so you can listen to it. But with my the way I zoom it in so that you can read the text as well, it's actually better if we play it just at 100%. So yeah, pretty awesome, I think. Obviously confirmation that it is the blue building from that original Friday Facts, or first Friday Facts. This one here, so this blue building is clearly the machine. One of the things that is interesting on this, it kind of, that rotation it's doing, so the way it's spinning around, it's rotating. Oh, well, for one thing, look at how much complex this whole thing is. But if you look at this structure on here, it's actually got the sort of rotating base to it. So that sort of like gearing around it and that type of thing. And the icons are always simplified. The Foundry doesn't quite look like that. So they're obviously always simple. But it's interesting the bits that were in there that we could pick up on. So this winding thing in the middle is actually a really key part of the machine. So this winding that's going on in the middle is a key part of it. It does actually look like it's making a stator or something like that from an electric engine. But yes, so I say maybe the icons don't look like this, but I'm pretty sure they will. But yes, that pretty much confirms that the green building is Bacchus. And what the heck is that going to be about? It does also, when we're thinking about this, for whenever this is revealed, I say the actual buildings are more complicated and bigger and more detailed than these. So this is clearly going to be the same. There's going to be a lot more to this than just what's shown here. However, I'm also wrong. So I got it right that this was going to be the building on Fulgora. However, what I said was that it was going to process aluminium. It's not processing aluminium. It doesn't actually even, by the sound of it, really... I mean, it sounds like it might do, but it doesn't really sound like it's processing this Holmium. It's more focused on electronic circuits. But also, it doesn't do speed. We'll come on to that in a second, actually. Let's read that part out. But I was wrong, basically. It isn't a speed boost that it's getting. Well, no, it's not. Let's not pretend I got it right. The Electromagnetic Plant is a 4x4 machine with a crafting speed of 2 and a built-in productivity bonus of 50% and 5 module slots. So in a sense, and say I'm cheating it a bit here, obviously, I didn't get it right, but having 5 module slots and it's already got a big productivity bonus and you've got loads of free power suggests that speed modules might be a really good thing to put into this machine, because 5 module slots, a inbuilt prod bonus of 50% and 5 module slots, you could obviously use them on prod, but put those in, but that's a hell of a lot of productivity, of speed potential, particularly when you beacon it. I don't know if it's speeds up when you put the actual speed module in the thing, but they're going to be like spinning, whirling dervishes basically. It can craft wire, circuits, electric poles, accumulators, lightning rods, supercapacitors, the new science pack, more electromagnetic plants, so that's the machine itself, various Tesla items. What are various Tesla items? A few other things. There's another building or something coming. And last but not least, modules. So I think I'm going to save this for later. So come back later in the video, basically for the speculation on what some of these things are. But this kind of shows a bit of a setup, basically, for these what they're called, electromagnetic plants. You've got 3 working here. It's taking in 3 fluids. I mean, this produces a pink fluid. And we don't have any pink fluids in the game. But basically it's taking in what looks like heavy oil and... Is petroleum purple? I don't remember it being that purple. But whatever this is making, it's making something pink. So these two... So it's processing fluids as well, which it doesn't quite say in that list. It says other things, few other things. So whatever fluid this is making, I think, comes under the few other things. So we'll get back to it properly later on. But also, it's taking in light oil, which is making into something else. Can we actually... Maybe I can pause that and see. So what does it move over there? Oh, look. That's some sort of blue wire, isn't it? Do we think? Do we think that's the superconductor? Superconducting... I mean, you wouldn't call it superconductor if... You wouldn't call it superconductor if it was a superconducting wire. So we'll come back to that, because we need to get through the basics first before I go on a massive wibble. But yes, so it's taking in what looks like light oil and making this superconducting wire, maybe. It's also taking in... that's also taking in stone. So whatever that is doing is producing something different. This is taking in copper as well. So it's not actually... Oh no, it's taking in holmium as well. So that could well be that superconductor. But it's taking in batteries, plastic and holmium, a purpley pink fluid and a blue wire. So it's taking in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients. So it's a 5-ingredient machine recipe. And it's putting out whatever this is, basically. There. So whatever that is, and we'll come back to it as I say, that's what it's making. But it's made 2 at a go. So it's made 2 at a pop, basically. So yes, this is a setup for running this machine, and it's got multiple of the old beacons around, the old lightning rods around. So this does make me wonder about what the... Because if one of these was enough to kind of cover the entire lightning area, harvest all the lightning around here, why would you need 3? The basic question then is, do you need 3 to gather up all the lightning, or is that just a better way of getting more lightning or encouraging more strikes? It's strange that there are 3 for this, because if it covers enough, then why not just have 1? But yeah, this is awesome. I really like the foundry. It was a bit, I don't know, it just felt a bit predictable. Really great and massive power, massive productivity boost and really, really awesome design and stuff like that. But it felt a bit predictable to me. This is way more off the wall. It's a lightning shooting, spinny building that pumps out weird blue wires and all sorts. So yeah, really looking forward to playing with that. The built-in productivity is really significant here because unlike productivity modules, built-in productivity is not restricted to intermediates only. As you know, productivity is most amazing when it starts multiplying over multiple recipe steps. Tier 3 modules are crafted in multiple steps, so making all the steps in electromagnetic plants really compounds the bonuses. So if you're not sure what that means, basically there are when you get to the end point in a lot of the chains, so certain items, that are, the culmination of building everything together. So for example, just as a very easy example, because I've been talking about them a lot, but belts, you can't put productivity modules in a machine making belts. You can put speed modules in it, you can't put prod modules in it. But what it's saying here is that this productivity bonus applies to everything it makes. So you would get, it does say a few other things, so maybe it does make belts, but whatever this makes, so the science pack, for example, the lightning rods, that's a building that you make, that gets a productivity bonus. And that might be why this pumps out 2, that the recipe is only 1, but it's just tipped over the prod bonus. Because basically what this is saying, 50% means that every 2 crafts you'll get an extra one. So it's like getting 3 for 2, buy one get one free. And basically, these things, it says circuits, so presumably that includes blue circuits as well. Maybe it doesn't mean that, but, electric poles, you're getting loads of free end products, basically, which is a huge benefit. Quality Module 3. Fulgora is also the planet where you unlock Quality Module 3s. We know that Quality is a mechanic unlocked on Nauvis, so they did say when they talked about that levels 1 and 2 you could get on Nauvis, and then level 3 was tied to another planet, so this is where we get it. And it does make sense given that the recycler is here as well. When you combine tier 3 quality modules with the 5 module slots in the electromagnetic plant, plus the built-in productivity and recyclers to clean up the rejects, then it suddenly starts to be really convenient to mass produce modules with quality. The craziness usually starts with making the highest quality tier 3 quality modules you can get. Quality modules adding more quality to new quality modules. So around and around we go in a wonderful quality carousel that ends with some very powerful machines crammed with very potent quality modules. And then it's just giving an example here with the electromagnetic, whatever it's called. I'm going to just forget that name over and over again. And the electromagnetic machine has quality modules going on it, level 3 quality, it's making quality modules and it's outputting quality modules. So it's basically, this is the ideal place to make quality modules. It does feel like this is also a bit of a response to the whole, but I don't like the productivity. There's that blue wire. I thought they'd said when they did the quality that these had exactly the same recipes, but that is definitely not the recipe for. I thought they'd said basically that a level 3 quality module was going to have the same recipe as a level 3 prod module, because all the modules have the same recipe now, but it looks like not. Which I think is what this is saying. This might not be the recipe for it, I guess, but it's got the red and the blue, but then it's then got the blue wire, and it's got. I know this is the contents. So I can't work out the ratios. Maybe it is twice as much as you would normally expect, because of how it does the double thing. But then why would it have 15 in? But it looks like the blue wire is actually an ingredient for level 3 quality modules. So they are different, basically, unless all modules now require some of the blue wire. That might be an interesting change. From there, you make modules of other kinds, and over time, you add all of the other things like assembling machines, chemical plants, platform components, equipment, spidertrons. Because growth is the only activity the factory deserves, and now that means vertical growth too. But wait, there's more. Remember that space platforms benefit from quality even more than ground bases. Space platforms are one of the main focal points for quality, after power armor and the equipment grid. Quality means that you can make platforms smaller but still do as much, or the same size while doing more and moving faster. This makes Fulgora another great option as your first stop after Nauvis. Which will you choose? We're going to have to find out what Bacchus is all about to make a decision, I think. But yeah, so this is basically saying that the planet is tied to quality, basically. You're getting these superconductive things, the blue wire presumably, but quality is what this planet is probably more about. And that does, I think, tie in with those small plateaus. Because if you what you're really making here is, a science pack, which you ship off, and quality items, which we all kind of know, unless you're a madman, basically, you're only going to make relatively small amounts of and use them for something very specialist, which is where platform sounds like the scale version of making them. Once you've got a level 5 quality power armor with level 5 quality, legs and all that sort of stuff, then you're done with that. And the platforms becomes the desired usage for quality, because you're then making... It did seem to imply the actual platform pieces could be quality as well, but basically, if you're putting on the engines, you're putting on the, your gun turrets for destroying your asteroids and all of those sorts of things, those get huge boosts from quality, and you're not going to have 1,000 platforms. I mean, I guess you could, but they're going to be more like trains than they are bots, basically. So you're going to want really, really good platforms which can zip between your planets, or that can carry insane amounts of stuff compared to a normal platform. And that's the type of stuff that you want to manufacture on Fulgora. And of course, you're going to want to do it probably at a scale, but not insane scale, because you're only going to end up with, 20 platforms or something. Having them and upgrading the quality of them, that feels a better use for them than building, say, 5,000 assemblers type of thing, because in a sense, who really cares? Conclusion by Coverx. This planet is an excellent example of why development behind closed doors for some time was a good idea. We could experiment and make decisions that would normally be viewed as extreme, like overhauling how an entire planet works. This allowed us to transform one of the most repetitive planets into one of the most novel ones. Since we were doing similar kinds of drastic changes all over the place, the original overall desperation described earlier is now long gone. I'm not saying that everyone will enjoy the expansion, but now at least we do. This is quite an important requirement for a good game, isn't it? Are you as amped for this planet as we are? As always, let us know at the usual places. So, I think that's kind of a bit of a... People get these slightly distorted pictures of game development, in the sense that games have a very important factor to them. They need to be fun. And fun is something you can only really discover through experimentation and trial and error. Well, let's have a look at example. There's multiple survival games seemingly released every single day, and they all involve tree punching and hitting rocks and building something, and they're all very mechanically similar, okay? But some of them take off and some of them don't. Some of them are more fun than others. You had Valheim explode during lockdown, for example. Vampire Survivors is another example of one that more sort of blew up, but then you get loads and loads and loads of crafting games survival and crafting games that just don't take off in that way. And learning what's fun and what makes your game unique and interesting and worth engaging with, and why the gameplay loop, what you keep doing remains fun for long term, is a difficult thing to pin down. And it's usually just like lightning in a bottle. It's like just magic, basically. You happen to hit it, and you can probably tweak games that are just slightly the wrong side of fun. But if it's not uncommon in these games that just aren't very good, that they basically discovered they weren't fun far too late, and they just had to keep going because they needed return on investment. And there are a lot of complex parts to game dev, basically, that get a bit whitewashed by some of these angry, shouty videos on YouTube, to be totally frank. Not that those don't necessarily make good points sometimes, but it's sometimes presented as, why didn't you just do this? That would have been better. And they probably were 99% of the way done before they discovered this was a problem, basically. And the point here that's being basically made is that by locking themselves away and not doing the early access process, they could get more experimental and try things. And having discovered that one of the planets they had, and maybe the whole concept of different planets, was boring, it gave them the opportunity to try weird and different stuff. And if that had failed, you wouldn't have had community backlash and all this sort of stuff. One of the things I did see during the early access period of the game, when it was being developed, and I felt it myself, is that you would have mechanics that got changed or like replaced or, adapted, and it would be very jarring. You'd played it for 200 hours with that exact same mechanic and you were happy with it, and then they came along and tweaked it or replaced it or added something in that made it redundant, or you'd come up with a strategy that you really exploited that out beyond belief, and then they changed it and they rebalanced it and what have you, and it can be a bit jarring and lead to negative reaction basically. Why are you changing this thing? It works fine already. And so that's effectively what they get to avoid by having this closed doors development. But the flip side, and this is sort of the other thing they're acknowledging, is that they've developed something that they find fun by not having that feedback, by not having that feedback from the community of people playing it and giving that feedback, well, it's fun, but it's too grindy, or it's not fun, or what have you. You're then talking about, I don't know, there's like 30, I think, in Woob now. I can't remember. But basically, you're getting to a stage where you're saying, right, well, these people find it fun. There's no guarantee that absolutely anybody else is going to. And maybe it gets too complicated for its own good. It, disappears up its own fundament. There are these problems then of keeping it back, basically. Now, that, of course, is where you can use playtesting, so you can get people from outside to play test it as well. And a lot of the industry uses mock reviews, so they'll get a reviewer to review a game and give them that feedback on what they think. What do you think of this game? And obviously, you've no guarantee that that's going to apply to the general community, everyone who plays your game, but at least gives you that preview basically of how it might be perceived, and you can use that feedback to tweak things and improve them, sort of thing. So there are ways around it, is what I'm saying, but the basic point is I think they're a little guarded, particularly given the reaction they had to quality in the first place, that this being the quality planet might not go down well in the community. To me, it sounds really interesting. I do have some concerns, particularly around, as I say, these tiny build areas. I hope whatever the landfill mechanic is, it's not actually that hard to implement, because there's one thing to say it's unlocked by a later tech. It's another that say that involves steel. Like every single piece of landfill involves steel. We're obviously getting steel out of scrap from the recipe, but landfilling a huge area when it needs steel is just an insane requirement. So you would have to limit the amount of landfill you could do. So I hope it's not that. I hope it is just regular concrete, and that's why it gives us concrete, because eventually you can just landfill with concrete and you can just make your big factories. Not necessarily from a point of view of that to make it, make it easy. It just comes back to that thing of, if you want to scale, then it's got to work for scale. If you want to go big, it's got to be reasonable for doing that. But if the planet is really focused on quality, and you want quality in relatively small volumes for most situations, that feels like it's an appropriate compromise. You've limited the building space, but you don't need to build big factories here anyway. So yeah, I hope it all works together, basically. Yes, overall then, speculation, etc., etc. So, first point of speculation is whether Wooby isn't trying to kill me with these gigantic updates. There's way, way, way more in this than we got in the first of the Volcanus updates. In that, there was a whole step of talking about the Foundry as a separate thing, which I hope we still get, because this new building does look really, really cool. So I hope we get some interesting insight on how that was put together and what it's doing. And I did say I would specifically talk about this new building, what it's doing. Linked to that, though, is the Holmium. So let's pop Holmium up in Wikipedia. So Holmium is this, basically. So it's like a silvery sort of metallic thing. It's not an element I'm familiar with particularly. It says it's a relatively soft, silvery, fairly corrosion resistant and malleable metal. So it's quite squishy, which would make it a good choice. Can see why it's being made into those wires. Presumably it's been made into those wires. One of the things that is interesting, it describes it as having, is it says Holmium has the highest magnetic permeability and magnetic saturation of any element, and is thus used for the pole pieces of the strong static magnets. Because Holmium strongly absorbs neutrons, it is also used as a burnable poison, I've never heard that phrasing before, in nuclear reactors. So obviously two things there. It's something that, it's highly magnetic, high sort of magnetic properties, shall we say. And we saw in one of the previous Friday Facts that there's a magnetic field on the planets, and we didn't really know what that was for. So that could tie together. It's just interesting that it's a magnetic material. I don't think it will be. I think this has been picked because of basically this planet being a electromagnetic planet. Basically, electricity and magnetism are basically the same thing essentially. I get in a lot of trouble from other physicists for saying that, but yeah, they're sort of almost two sides of the same coin basically. So I think it's there. And when they're talking about superconductors and super, what do they describe them as? So electrolyte, superconductors, and supercapacitors. Electrolyte is basically like a fluid that's got lots of ions in it, basically. So I'm not going to go into the acids, but you can look it up on Wikipedia. It does explain it all. But it's also like a salt, basically. So it's like a salt solution is another way of kind of talking about electrolytes. It's why energy drinks have electrolytes, because it's a fancy scientific word for a salt, basically. But they're used in ion exchange. So any electricity and I'm trying not to get too into it because this video is already going to be absolutely enormous. But what I suspect that is, the electrolyte, basically, is, there was this weird pink fluid here. I think it's that, basically. I think that might be the electrolyte. And that maybe there's like a molten, that might be what this, pink, purpley colour one is. It isn't petroleum. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not going to bother looking it up, and it doesn't really matter. But, that sort of purpley colour is a bit like that purpley colour there to me. So I wonder if this is the electrolyte being made, and that the pink one here is the electrolyte. And what you do to make these, and I think these might be the supercapacitors. I think that's what's coming out here. That thingy there is a supercapacitor, which is essentially a large battery. So I think they're the big batteries that we were speculating might come on. Whether that means there's then a level 2, what you would use that for is the big question. And I'm kind of hoping, I'll be honest. So what's interesting is that, like, when we found out about tungsten on Vulcanus, and now that we're finding out about holmium on Fulgora, we're not really finding out what they're used for as such. We know they're used in the making of the particular machines that you unlock, but we don't really know what else they're used for. And I kind of hope that stays that way. I hope we don't find out, what the end game is. I hope we don't find out, what these all go to make. Maybe a couple of things just for interest, but I'd quite like quite a lot of it to be kept secret and to be there to discover. I know that within a day, and you'll just look through the tech tree and you'll find out what it is. But I kind of want that discoverability. I want a bit of the surprise to be there, when we get to it actually being released, basically. But yes, I suspect that basically you take batteries and holmium and plastic and the blue wire, so the superconducting wire, and you make supercapacitors. So I think when it talks about electrolyte, I think that's the pink fluid being made. I think the superconductors are the wires. I think it's a superconducting wire. And supercapacitors are the actual thing, that thing that it makes that are basically large batteries, like super batteries. And I think what they'll be used for is a whole range of machine. I think one of these probably will, to make one of these, you probably need supercapacitors and, superconductors and that sort of thing. So there'll be a way of making themselves, a bit like the foundry, uses tungsten to make, or makes tungsten, which you then use to make foundries, basically. I think it's the same thing. So you'll be able to make them in other ways. So you'd be able to ship them off planet and, make holmium-related products using regular assemblers and chemical labs, etc. I don't think we'll be limited in that way. Although we do know these will be locked. The actual electromagnetic machines will be locked to this planet. You can only make them here. And basically, I think what they'll eventually all build up to is whatever the end game is. I think, there will be other new things, because we're finding out how we can make a lot of stuff. We're not finding out, how we can use that extra stuff. So what is the next set of techs that these go into? We found out that there's, the super belt, for example. Is there a super robot? Is there a super train? We already know elevator trains. We know there's quality. What are all these new things being used to make. And I think that's the end game. I think they all build up to the end game. Obviously, it's also going to go in the science pack. The science pack is going to use these as well. But then what is that science pack for? Why are we making all these different science packs? To do what? To make what? That's the big mystery that has captivated me, shall we say. But yes, back to Holmium, basically. So according to its usages, unlike tungsten, which I'm familiar with, and I kind of know about that, this one I don't know. So the big thing it's obviously talking about here is like basically a glass, so an optical absorption. I haven't a clue what that would be. I mean, it could be something to do with like a space telescope. I don't know what that might be for. That's a bit strange. Again, it talks about the whole magnetic fields and permanent magnets. I think that's just like the cheaty way that they're doing superconductors. I think that's what that means effectively. It's like super magnets rather than like proper superconductors. Don't know though. What is interesting here in this one is it talks about solid state lasers and microwaves, fiber optics. So are we getting a new type of laser? Is there a level 2 laser? Don't know. What is interesting again is we're getting mention here, and it was in the tungsten one as well, about using nuclear power basically, which is interesting. That is a very interesting coincidence that tungsten is sort of used in nuclear power basically, and also this holmium is as well. But, and this kind of probably ties a bit back to space exploration, with sufficient quantum and classical control techniques, holmium may be a good candidate for quantum computers. Now in SpaceX, there is the whole supercomputer mechanic. That is used in a lot of the science pack production in space. So is that suggesting that maybe we're getting a similar mechanic in Factorio? Are we building a supercomputer? Is that the end game? Are we building a massive supercomputer that, I don't know, does something? Could be interesting. But yes, it's interesting it's using quantum computers and that SpaceX has that supercomputer, which could be a quantum computer mechanic in it. So are we getting something similar in the vanilla Factorio, that there's going to be supercomputers? That's what you use these superconducting wires and supercapacitors and what have you to make. Okay, so coming back as well to the machine more generally, there are a couple of items that it mentions that we don't quite know what they mean, or I don't quite know what they mean, because it says various Tesla items. I don't remember there being any Tesla items in the game. There are, however, and I knew I remembered it from somewhere, Tesla coils in Crashtorio 2. And of course, Crashtorio 2 was made by someone who became a dev in the game. So, also, we know that there's quite a lot of, shall we say, overlap to Command and Conquer with Factorio, how it looks and that sort of thing. And Tesla coils are a key mechanic in the Red Alert series of God, I miss playing Red Alert games. I wish they hadn't, I wish EA didn't own that series. Anyway, the Tesla items. What does Tesla items mean? You would expect Tesla coils, but Tesla did a hell of a lot. And this is the other thing I was talking about. With the holmium, with the nuclear power, there's a lot of Tesla's main contributions are actually in power. He was like the big advocate for AC power, and he worked a lot on wireless power transfer, and three-phase power is basically Tesla, and there are all sorts of things that Tesla invented and created that relate to power. And of course, we just had a mention with holmium about nuclear power. So is there some other big power mechanic coming to the game? The obvious thing, as I say, is that we're going to get a Tesla coil turret or something like that, in a sort of shall we say, a Command and say Red Alert homage, shall we say. But it could be, that it's used in some sort of electric engine or So he did a hell of a lot of, work with all sorts of electricity stuff. So there could be anything there, but various Tesla items is clearly, I mean, unless these are just called Tesla coils or something like that, maybe that's what it means. The old lightning rods are actually called Tesla coils in the game, or Tesla towers or something like that. I don't know why they would be, and that it wouldn't just say that, because it's called them lightning rods, But basically, what are Tesla items in the game? That's a real question. And again, this is where you guys put in loads of comments saying, what Tesla items are this? And you're just not remembering it. But yes, this thing, getting productivity bonus, it's something I didn't really think about with the Foundry, because that also has an inbuilt productivity bonus, is that because it can make later stage items that you wouldn't normally get prod bonus on, it's like giving you loads and loads of free stuff. So again, it's like big factories in an easy way. I suppose the other thing to do is to wallow through my inaccurate predictions that I did in my little mini video. So first off, no liquid water. Got that correct. But what I said is that it was a byproduct. I suppose that's technically correct. Although I didn't guess correctly, in that I thought it would involve oil, and it actually comes out of scrap. You get it out of ice, you melt the ice to get water. No aquifers. Although interestingly, you do put the offshore pumps in the oil to get the oil, so then you don't use oil derricks basically. So you can mine the oil sand with regular miners. Nope. They produce oil sand that you can process, and I thought it might involve heat to give you oil and sand. Nope. Sand is used in other recipes but can also be turned into glass. So no, but as people pointed out, I mean, it could still be there. That could be what that white resource is, maybe. But what are the trees about then? Because people kind of figured those are, which is one here. The trees are actually Fulgorite and give you glass when mined. Well, they still look like that. Fulgorite is when you get a lightning strike on sand in particular, and it turns the sand into glass. And then when you dig it out, it actually looks like a frozen lightning strike. And they do look a lot like that. So what's that all about? But yes, I got that completely wrong. You can use a regular machine. There's no new machine for doing it. But no, you don't use miners. You put an offshore pump on it. Lightning is highness for power using a lightning rod. So I got that right. It's also in protect your trains. The engineer's lightning rod is a weirdly spiky icon, which you saw. Yes, I still think it's that icon. We've not had confirmation or denial of that. However, we also get an electric train as part of this. Interrupt is to repair trains that get hit. That could still be the case. We know that the rail is immune to lightning, basically. So your trains could still get hit. So you could have an interrupt that is, you've been damaged, go to a repair bay. So that could be a thing. And your track could still be intact because it's protected from the thing. So it's not that the track gets blown up and your train can't go anywhere. It's that the train gets damaged by lightning as it goes between these places. Because we know that it's going to be able to travel, if you're using the trains to go huge distances between the different plateaus, but your lightning rods only stretch so far, then they're bound to get hit by lightning as they're going across. So I still think that's correct. But no electric trains yet. However, the flowers aren't anything, just decoratives, no spice melange. Not really had confirmation either way. The trees are actually Fulgorite and give you glass when mined. They've not been mentioned, so they could still be a thing. Again, so these two are sort of a bit open. But if these trees are Fulgorite, is glass a thing? Is that what the white resource is, as I say? There is coal. No, there isn't. I think coal might be on every planet just to give you a way of making power on plastic needed for rocket parts. That's interesting. If there is no coal, how do we make plastic? We get plastic out of the recycle recipe here. No, we don't. We get red circuits and blue circuits. Oh, and low density structures. Huh. So although we're getting lots and lots of oil, we don't have a way of turning it into plastic. We would have to ship in coal. That's interesting. So maybe coal is there somewhere? It didn't look like it was on the map though. But maybe there's no native way of making plastic on Fulgorite. You've just got to recycle it. Or say you could ship it in. Though that's very expensive, isn't it? Another option here is we don't have coal and that you can burn oil instead, but it means new recipes or burner power sources, since currently we need a way to turn oil into solid fuel. Obviously, we now know we get solid fuel out of the thing, and we know how we've got water and absolutely abundant oil, so this is clearly wrong. You can't, but well, I mean, maybe you can, but you can't burn oil from what we've seen. The weird patches are mixed scrap. They're crashed alien platforms. I'm still going to maintain that fiction. We don't know. We've not been specifically told. It's just, scrap. And give you a randomised amount of iron and copper. No, they give you more higher level things than just iron and copper. This could be a new scrap resource, as people have suggested, that you can process in recyclers to make into actual useful resources. So I was just going with the crowd there. That wasn't an idea I'd had. My concern here would be that it's creating a trapped loop. You need recyclers to process scrap, but you need to process scrap to make recyclers. So I'm not convinced. I haven't really answered that question. How do we make some of the basic stuff if we arrive on Fulgora and all you can do is make... How are you researching your first and building your first recycler if these are what you get? If there's no iron plate and there's no green circuits, how do you make your first recycler? And how do you make anything? How do you make an assembly machine? You can't make an assembly machine out of those. So that bit is missing, isn't it? But I do think these patches are your only native source of iron and copper. So yeah, we know that's true. Apart from this, I think there might still be alien platforms in Fulgora orbit. If there are, they've not been mentioned. They're infested with alien enemies, may not be biters, but there's some cool stuff there. These will be things you can't make as such, but every platform has at least one. So there's something on the platform, that you would have to get from the platform you couldn't just make. That may be key to the end game, perhaps part of a blueprint, and you need 5 of them. This is there for the first quest type mechanic in Factorio, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some workaround. Getting way too carried away there again, as per usual. I'm sure there's no questing in Factorio. The enemy on the planet is the brain bug. It can shoot lightning. It lives in the lightning storms, so even once you've gotten lightning rods, there is still a threat from the storms. But you also get power, so you have to balance that. Weapons near your lightning rods. They're almost immune to lasers. Maybe we have energy shields, but vulnerable to bullets and especially oil, meaning fire basically. But then you might set your base on fire. So no confirmation of the brain bug. I guess it could still be there, but I now suspect there is no threat on, no alien on Fulgora, and the only threat comes from the lightning. We can't build our own cliff walls. These are just aesthetics, flavour in the alien cities. No confirmation either way. I think that's probably wrong. I don't think we can build it. I think it represents the plateaus, so it actually represents, and somebody said this in my comments basically, that the plateaus are on a level, so they're on high level basically. For the train. So when you go between with your elevated rail, then it's basically, you're going from 2 high up points. You can mine up and remove all the buildings to give you clear space. Yep, but some of them are like spaceships. They can be used as chests, but also some can also be used as crude machines or power sources. That doesn't appear to be the case. They do appear to act as sort of lightning rods, though, by the sound of things. That's how you discover the tech from harnessing lightning power and the lightning rod. You have to mine up several of them, not just one. We don't know. The other resources we've not seen is aluminium, and it's processed in the blue machine, and it has a speed effect. I'm sticking to my guns here. Oh dear. Completely wrong. So no aluminium or Fulgora, unless it's the white stuff. That could be another option for it. We're just not being told, but they did say that the unique resource was Holmium, and that was it, basically. So I don't think that's the case now. I still think we might get something like aluminium, but certainly the machine is not a speed-based machine, other than the fact that you can stick 5 modules in it. So it's it sort of is even speediable. I still think we might get something aluminium. However, I'm kind of coming round to the feeling that they are deliberately picking very obscure materials. We've had tungsten on Vulcanus and, Holmium, of all things, on Fulgora. I think the materials, particularly mineable materials, I say Bacchus may well be some kind of bio thing going on, so completely different again, which would make sense. It pushing me more and more towards this being very different mechanics on every planet. But if there is some resource there, I don't think it's going to be anything boring now like aluminium or titanium or something like that. It's going to be something completely wacky that you couldn't predict, like mercury or something, or something weird that you would make something like specialist out of, basically. And those are your reasons for going there, basically. That would also kind of tie in with, if it was something like aluminium or titanium, that would push you to having to move it around more. If you think about it, the planets are kind of going to be self-contained factories to a degree, and it's really things like the very specialist machines that you're moving off. So it's your green belts, your foundries, your electromagnetic machines. Those are what you're moving around, not the raw material. Because if you used aluminium, you'd then think you would use it in a lot of buildings as a lightweight, metal used for construction. And then you would need to be shipping that all around your planets, and that would be this problem they were talking about, that every planet just becomes an outpost, and that you build everything on Nalvis, and that's how they avoid it. So it's a weird thing that's only used on that planet. All you can make from it are machines that are only made on that planet, and science packs that can only be made on the planet, and therefore that makes it a self-contained factory. So I say now I'm tending to think it won't be aluminium. I actually think aluminium or something might still be there, and that's on the 5th planet. But to mine it, you've got to use and process it. You've got to use all these wacky machines and stuff, and you've got to bring them in and bring it all together on the final planet. But I think Bacchus will have something strange. It'll be blooming cadmium, or I don't know, just some wacky thing that you wouldn't expect, basically. So not quite a complete sweep of humiliating wrong predictions, but not far off. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you want to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming every Saturday over on my Twitch channel, Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Quite a long wibble.